is how we understand reality. And what makes us confused and frustrated is when we don't have a frame readily at hand to understand what we're experiencing. We get disoriented, and then we start to act out differently. When I'm in some cultures, I act differently in that culture. And if one of my family members is with me, they interrogate me afterwards and say, "What were you doing? Help me to understand what you just did." In the framing of things, we start to assign values. We start to assign values, and we start to interject assumptions as to what's really going on. And we may or may not be correct. So let me use, again, a church example just to put this in a way of thinking. Some of you know this sociology in a church, that in a church, when a new pastor comes in, for example, there are these segments of the population of the congregation that will be present in that congregation. There are some who are older and came to the church under a former pastor. There are some who are younger and were part of the church with the former pastor. Similarly, there are some who are new that came under the new pastor, and some that are young that came under the new pastor. And how they say yes differs. So if you're going to try to persuade someone who is in this category, then the persuasive act is going to have to be framed in terms of, use the language of, the former era, and to honor the traditions that the other pastor honored. Because that's how they frame reality. That's their frame of reference. In this category, it'll take a kind of frame that says, we're going to honor the former pastor, but we know that you're a little bit more open to change and you have a different kind of experience around, say, technology or some of these other kinds of issues that might face us as a church. And because of your generation and because of your issues, we may pitch in a different kind of way. In the same way, if there is a junior person coming in, anyone that comes under the new pastor is going to have a default loyalty to the new pastor. So the persuasive act might be less rigorous, but it still has to pay attention to the generational issues. Because how they frame reality, how they talk about their reality, will have those kinds of reference points in the frame. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, in talking about organizational culture, in talking about the ways in which we work with those cultures, Carl White does a good job of describing how we make sense of things, how we, in organizations particularly, try to bring meaning to what we're experiencing. And when he talks about sense-making organizations, he uses some categories that might be useful, whether it be in a church or an institution or a parachurch, whatever it might be. These are healthy practices that help the crowd to make sense of what's going on, rather than leaving them to their own devices and their own interpretations. Okay? So especially when working a change initiative, helping the population, the people, the audience in that organization to have some tools and some systems and structures to make sense of what's happening will be pretty critical. Okay? So the questions that Carl will ask of an organization is, does it have a kind of vehicle, a kind of process that encourages conversation across the organization? Or is there a gag order implied that the only way or time you can talk about such things is out in the parking lot or in the neighborhood bar? So is there a set of permissions given that say, no, it's okay to talk about that here. It's right to have that conversation. So it's okay in this classroom to say, you know, I'm not sure that I got what I needed from Coach Perry. Coach Perry has failed me a lot of times. And I wish there would be a stronger, better company, but I've been disappointed so many times I just quit using it. That's honest conversation. That's okay. And it's okay to say, you know, Tom, look, you probably didn't handle that David situation very well. You probably got to have been healthier in that, and maybe come at it this way. That's a healthy conversation. Okay? So does the organization have a kind of social context that encourages honest discussion, honest exchange? Does it have give to the people a distinct sense of who they are and what they represent? Do I, when I wear this shirt, if it were to have the Cokesbury logo on it, by the way, it's a Cokesbury shirt, do I have a way in which I can identify my role in the company and my sense of contribution in that, and how I am respected as an individual within this mass of people? Okay? So that sense of identity. There is a clothing, an attire, or dress code here that the default says if you are at a certain stage or level, if you have a certain public presence, then you either wear a tie or you have an Asbury logo on it. As you may recognize, the Asbury logo shifted in the last couple of years, and I've said to the president, the vice presidents, you know, when I get money to buy another shirt with a new logo, I'll do that, but until then, I'll have the old Asbury on there, and we'll be okay. And they responded, that's a good idea. So what's the sense of identity that's fostered within the organization? Secondly, how do you help the people in it to embrace the history, what has occurred already in that organization? So the quickest way to get moved from a church, for example, is to not honor the past. When a pastor comes in or a leader comes in an organization and says, everything else you've done to this point is stupid, it's ineffective, it stinks, so we're going to do something different. Here we go. Well, that violates a very serious rule of organizational life, of social psychology, that says unless you can respect the past, you can't build on it. So in that sense, how do we understand that kind of past experience, and how do we legitimate it? Did you notice in the first year or so of Dr. Tennett's arrival, he was referring to the history of the seminary and to the great leaders of the seminary, the great eras of the seminary. Now he also said that both Ellsworth Callis and Ira Galloway are as old as the seminary. He also made those statements. But he was trying to connect with the legacy of the institution and to honor that past. That's why for the first year or so he would talk about his former location as Brand X. He wanted to honor the new location and what that meant and the value of that.